Oh hi. Denmark, the state in Northern Europe, the senior dick of the Commonwealth of the Danish United Kingdom, which also includes the Faroe Islands and the autonomous territory Greenland. The population on the first quarter 2020, 5,822,763 persons. The area -43094 km. Population density -134,85 people/km. Today Denmark is the most densely populated state of Scandinavia. Denmark, the most southern of the Scandinavian countries. It is located to the southwest from Sweden and to the south from Norway. From the south borders on Germany by land. Denmark is washed Baltic and northern by the seas. The territory of the country includes the big peninsula Jutland and 409 islands of the Danish archipelago, among which are most known such as Zealand, Fyn, Vendsyssel, Lolland, Falster and Bornholm. Denmark constitutional monarchy. The head of state is the monarch who carries out legislature together with unicameral parliament, Folketinget. 179 deputies. Denmark, the member of the European Union since 1973, but is still not included into the Eurozone. Denmark is one of founders of NATO and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Denmark, the unitary state. The capital, Copenhagen. The toponym etymology Denmark is definitely not found out so far and remains a subject of scientific disputes. The old German tribe is mentioned in sources of the 5-6 centuries or given, living on the Jutland Peninsula. In the 9th century, at the administrative device of boundary lands of the Empire of Charles the Great, Denmark, Danish brand, was formed. The brand other top. I am mute. Border, boundary lands. Denmark, which became in the 11th century the state. Denmark is located on the peninsula Jutland and the islands of Fyn, Zealand, Falster, Lolland, Bornholm, a part North Frisian, etc. In the south of the peninsula Jutland, Dania borders on Germany and it is washed northern and Baltic by the seas. The passage Skagerrak separates Denmark from Norway, and the Kattegat Straits and Øresund from Sweden. Formerly the largest island in the world, Greenland and also the Faroe Islands is a part of Denmark, however these territories use the self-government, doing them almost independent. The space occupied by the land -42394 km. Water -700 km. The highest point Idingskavki, 173 m. The lowest Lammerfjord, 7 m. Extent of borders with Germany -67 km. Coastline extent -7314 km. Country landscape low. A relief flat with freezing traces. In the west of Jutland, sandy and thin plains. In the north and the east, a hilly relief with ridges of moraines up to 173 m high, and numerous lakes are located. The small rivers, the most considerable of them, Gudano, prevail. On the plain, numerous small flowing lakes of glacial origin are located. The climate is moderate sea with soft and stable winter in the cool summer and the extended transitional seasons. Average temperature of February 1. 0 C, July +15. +17 C. Landscapes of Denmark belong to one of three types: agricultural grounds, treeless communities, meadows, swamps, heather heathlands, and forest plantings. The woods, as of 2005, occupy about 13% of the territory of the country. Radical broadleaved, beechen and oak. The woods were destroyed during development of the territory. Now annually about 300 hectares of the woods land. On islands the cultivated oak woods, on the Jutland Peninsula coniferous prevail. A fir tree ordinary, pines. In the territory of Denmark 49 species of mammals live, from them 19 are included in the Red List of Denmark. Most of them rodents and insectivorous. In forests the rowan, a red deer; in waters of the North Sea, the Baltic seal, an ordinary seal, a Dlinimurdi seal remained. Since 1850 about 350 native species and of animals and plants are lost. The population on the second quarter 2021, 5,843,347 people. The largest cities: Copenhagen, 1,096,187 people. Aarhus, 219,003 people. Odense, 145,300 people. Aalborg, 120,059 people. Average life expectancy -79.52 years at men, 83.51 at women is 2021. Age structure: up to 14 years -16.42%. From 15 to 64 years -63.67%. Of 65 years is also more senior -19.91%. 2020. Average age of the population. The population in general -42 years. Men -40.9 years. Women -43.1 years. 2020. 1 million pupils. More than 2 million families. From 100 families 55 possess own houses. A she part of the population, the Scandinavian origin, small groups are made by Inuits, or Eskimos of Greenland, Faroes, Germans, Frieses and immigrants. According to official statistics, in 2003 immigrants made 6.2% of the population. Speak Danish in all territory of the country, though a small part of the population living on border with Germany also speaks German. Many Danes also well know English, especially residents of the large cities and youth which learns English at schools. According to official statistics for January 2002, 87.4% of Danes are members of the established Danish National Church, Den Dansk Folkekirke, famous also as Church of Denmark and belonging to Lutheranism. But by results of poll of Eurobarometer of 2005 is shown that Denmark, the fourth from below, 8% of believers is less only in the Czech Republic, Estonia, Sweden. In the list of believers of the countries in the EU, only 31% of Danes believe in God, 49% trust in any spirit or force of life, 19% don't believe neither in God, nor in any spirit or force of life. The rest of the population professes, generally, other faiths of Christianity. These are Catholics, Adventists, Baptists, Methodologists, supporters of Salvation Army and Danish Pentecostal movement. Assemblies of God. About 3% Muslims. By estimates for 2019 of 74.7% of the population, Evangelical Lutherans, and Muslims -5.5%. From 2001 to 2011 in power there was a coalition of minority of Venstre and Conservative People's Party. In exchange for support of the third largest far-right Danish People's Party, the government consistently toughened the immigration law. Anti-immigration measures significantly reduced inflow of separate categories of migrants to Denmark. In particular, in 2006 4198 entry visas for reunion of families were issued, that is 70% less than in 2001, and the political asylum was granted to 1098 people. 82.5% less. At the same time, during 2001-2006 the number received the educational visa increased from 10 up to 28.4 thousand people. Growth by 2.8 times. And driven on a working visa, from 5.9 up to 12.8 thousand people. Growth by 100%. In 2011 measures were still toughened. In particular, the system of points for spouses of immigrants, persons interested to drive to the country, was introduced. These measures are criticized by the European and international organizations as not corresponding to the European legislation on human rights. As of 2021, 86% of all population of Denmark are made by ethnic Danes, another 14% are more than people, immigrants and their descendants. 199,668 people, the immigrants of the second generation who were born in Denmark. The first traces of the person in the territory of Denmark are dated Risfjormski Mesolednikovi. About 170,000 years ago. Pioneer settlements belong to culture to Brahma. The end of the Top Paleo. The period of Mesoliths presented by archaeological finds of cultures of Maglemose and Ertebile. About 3,900 years in the territory of Denmark appeared BB agriculture. The Scandinavian Bronze Age is noted by a number of archaeological finds, from them the so-called solar vehicle from Trundholm is most known. At the end of the first millennium BB in the territory of the Jutland Peninsula Cimbri and Teftona lived. In the 4th century on the territory of Denmark of the Prophet of Utah and Anangle, during great resettlement of the people they migrated to Britain, and the peninsula Jutland commerce from the south of the Scandinavian peninsula occupied are given. The first information about them appears in sources of the 6th-7th centuries. Were given or united in the patrimonial unions, by the beginning of the 9th century at them the early feudal structure of society at the head of which there were leaders. Konungs. Below nobility and free peasants community members. Bonds. Which had the right to carry arms began to develop. were given by active participants of campaigns of Vikings who occurred since the end of 8th and 11th centuries. During this period Iceland was mastered and also settlements in Greenland and North America are created. Vinland. This settlement Hadabu in the southern Jutland became important trade knot. Great Britain and France were the main direction of campaigns of Thanes. The Danish governor Gudfred was at war with Charles the Great. The Koning Rurik Jutlandski is identified by some historians with Rurik, the founder of a dynasty of the Russian princes. Capture of Paris is attributed to the Koning Ragnar Lodbrok, or the Viking Roland, as a result of a successful campaign received to the feud of the Earth in the north of France and became the first Duke of Normandy. At the end of the 9th century Danes intruded in England and won extensive areas of northeast England. The King Knut Walicki by 1028 united Denmark, Norway and England under the power, however his power broke up within several years after his death in 1035. In 1086 Knud Forsweto, Knud Walicki's grandson, was killed. In Denmark intestine war which continued to the middle of the 12th century began. Christianization of Denmark began in the 8th century and is connected with activity of missionaries Willibrord and Ansgar. In the 960th years the King Harald I Seinseby was christened itself and made Christianity the state religion. In 1104 in Lund the archbishopric was created. Since the 11th century in Denmark there was feudal relationship. The place of nobility was taken by the king's confidants receiving the earth for service. In 1157 Valdemar the Great became the king and the period of intestine wars ended. He, his son Knud VI and the grandson Valdemar II conquered Pomerania, Mecklenburg and Galstein, having broadened the territory of the country at the expense of the southern coast of the Baltic Sea. In 1241 at Valdemar II the Danish right, the so-called Jutland Law, was codified. Since the middle of the 13th century the monarch was often forced to resist to the nobility seeking to limit the power of the king. Eric V in 1282 signed a charter limiting the royalty, but already 4 years later was killed. At Eric VI, via the active expansionist policy, the royal treasury was exhausted so that his brother and the successor Christopher II was forced to put the most part of lands to the German and Swedish feudal lords. After his death within 8 years the Danish monarchy was liquidated. It was restored by Christopher II's son Valdemar IV Atterdag. The new king called representative body and accepted the so-called territorial world, the agreement between the king and the states according to which estates undertook to submit to the king and the king to rule over the country observing the law. Valdemar IV Margred's daughter got married with the Norwegian king Håkon VI. After his death in 1382 monarchy became integrated. In 1397 Margred was elected also to the Swedish throne. The union received the name of the Kalmar Union, at the head of which there was Denmark, therefore all Scandinavia appeared under the rule of the Danish crown. At the same time the union was fragile and between the states which were its part there were military conflicts. Since 1433 I became the residence of the King Copenhagen. In the 15th, 16th centuries the power belonged to Riksrådet, Royal Council. Riksråd elected the king, who since 1448 was one of representatives of the Oldenburg dynasty. Since 1468 the class representative assembly was elected, which representatives of the nobility, clergy, citizens and free peasants entered. However, it had no considerable powers. In 1523 the King Christian II was deposed and expelled, and to a throne there ascended his uncle Frederick I. The distemper coincided with the revolt in Sweden directed against the Kalmar Union. In 1523 Gustav the Vasa Eriksson took Stockholm and was crowned as Gustav I. The Kalmar Union stopped existence. In distribution of Lutheranism in Denmark, the crucial role was played by Luther's associate Hans Tausen, to whom Frederick I himself, probably sympathizing Lutheranism, patronized. The Lutheranism won popularity at the lowest layers, paying more taxes in favor of Catholic Church, and became the reason of disorders in a number of the areas of Denmark. It accused the king of insufficient diligence in suppression of revolts. In reply to Frederick I made the statement in which I left the choice of religion to the discretion of each citizen until the question isn't considered by council, which convocation was planned in the future. On the public debate which took place in 1530, Tausen won a convincing victory over Catholic clergy. After Frederick I's death, which happened in 1533, pro-Catholic didn't begin to elect the new king, and I established oligarchical board. In Malmö and Copenhagen power was seized by the risen citizens. The next 3 years are known in a historiography as a town conflict. Erzim called the expelled Christian II, therefore the nobility and clergy was forced to elect the king of the son Frederick Christian III, who made indistinct statements of rather future religious policy. On August 6, 1536, Christian III took Copenhagen. Having approved as the king, Christian III carried out laicization of church lands and arrested Catholic bishops who were declared guilty of unleashing of civil war. On October 30, the law which formalized the Reformation in Denmark was adopted. In 1563, the Danish King Frederick II of the beginning's so-called Northern 7 Years' War mined Sweden. Till the 19th century, between the countries there were some more wars for hegemony in the region. In the next years Frederick II gained fame as the patron of sciences and arts. In 1576 he granted the astronomer Tycho Brahe the island of Vanes and allocated funds for construction of Uraniborg Observatory. At Frederick III, Denmark became absolute monarchy. Were liquidated and the monarchy is announced hereditary. To the state positions began to accept not only noblemen, but also natives of city-estate. Military reform was undertaken, the Rekrutsky duty is entered, expenses on army in 1662 in comparison with 1602 grew by 40 times. But as peasants evaded from recruitments, in 1680 there was a restored hired army. In 1671 it was entered Table of Ranks, on which sample later Peter I created a similar document in Russia. At Frederick's successor Christian V there took place codification of the Danish legislation. At the end of the 17th century in Denmark the first royal and private manufactories appeared. Christian VII, governing in the 18th century, is considered the feeble-minded king. At him the queen attracts on service of Johan Struens, who tries to obtain the power, becomes the minister. Claim that he was also the queen's lover. Undertakes positive reforms, improves the life of people, but limits the rights of noblemen. As a result of a plot of dissatisfied aristocrats it was executed, reforms are partially cancelled. In 1788 in Denmark the remains of the serfdom are finally cancelled. At the end of the beginning of the 19th century, Denmark was included into the armed neutrality initiated by the Russian Empire. The Union broke up in 1801 after defeat in sea battle with the English fleet. In 1807 Denmark joined continental blockade that was the cause of the Anglo-Danish War. The King Frederick VI was involved in Napoleonic Wars on side of France. During the military campaign 1813-1814 the Swedish troops intruded in Denmark from the south and crushed the Danish army. Following the results of the Kiel peace treaties and the Vienna Congress, Denmark ceded Norway to Sweden and the island of Helgoland of Great Britain. At the same time Denmark kept Iceland, Greenland, the Faroe Islands and the Duchy of Schleswig-Holstein. In the first half of the 19th century monarchs undertook a number of the liberal reforms. In 1848 Frederick VII called the Constituent Assembly which drafted the Constitution of Denmark. She provided two-chamber parliament and the government responsible before the king. The lower house of parliament, a Folketing, was formed by direct elections in which all men could participate 30 years or more. Senior elections to the upper house, a Landsting or Multistage. The first half of the 19th century is also called Golden Age of Denmark, as during this period in the country a number of outstanding cultural figures and science, including the sculptor Bertel Thorvaldsen, artists Christopher Wilhelm Eckersberg and Christian Kjopke, the physicist Hans Christian Ørsted, the philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, the writer Hans Christian Andersen worked. As a result of war with Prussia, Denmark lost Schleswig, Holstein and Saxon-Lauenburg. In the second half of the 19th century in Denmark there was a multi-party system in which the liberal Venstre and conservative Højre were the most influential parties. In 1871 the Social Democratic Party of Denmark was formed. At the turn of the century in Denmark social and economic transformations were carried successfully out. The tax system is reformed, the credits for landless peasants are entered and financial support of the unemployed the source is in specified 288 days. Since 1901 in Denmark the system of parliamentarism began to develop. The king appointed the prime minister and several key ministers. Another government was created by deputies of the Venstre which won elections. In 1903 Iceland received autonomy. In foreign policy Denmark since 1864 adhered to a neutrality and didn't take part in World War I. In 1915 a new constitution which granted to women the right to vote on elections to a Folketing was adopted. In 1918 Iceland gained independence as the Kingdom Iceland, which was, however, in the personal union with Denmark. Since 1913 in Denmark in power there was a coalition of social liberals and social democrats. In 1915 the constitution is adopted. In 1919 it could undertake the land reform which allowed to redistribute the land plots in favor of small-scale enterprises. The government was dismissed by the King Christian X, who was dissatisfied with his foreign policy and appointed the new government led by the conservative Otto Lied that provoked the national disorders known as Easter Crisis. The king was forced to dismiss Lied and to appoint a transitional government and new elections, by results of which the following office was created. Elections on April 11, 1924. The next elections led to resignation of the government of Niels Neergaard, and in Denmark the Social Democratic government of Thorvald Stauninger, which with a small break existed till 1942, was for the first time approved. In September 1939, Denmark signed the Non-Aggression Pact with Nazi Germany and announced the neutrality. However, in April of the next year, Germany occupied the country. The first years the occupational mode was quite soft. In 1943, in response to activity of a resistance movement and defeat of National Socialists on elections to a Folketing, Nazis stripped of power on August 29, the coalition government imposed state of emergency and began prosecution of Jews. Most of them could flee to Sweden. Massachusetts protests, strikes and diversions became reaction to actions of invaders. In 1944, Iceland proclaimed sovereignty. On May 5, 1945, Denmark was freed by the British troops. Denmark became one of the founder states of the Union. On October 24, 1945, and NATO. On April 4, 1949. The important role in post-war restoration of the country was played by financial aid of the USA of $350 million. In 1953, the constitution existing at the moment, which replaced two-chamber parliament unicameral and allowed inheritance of a throne to women, was adopted. Margaret II in 1972 became the first female monarch. In 1948, self-government was entered on the Faroe Islands, and in 1979 in Greenland. In 1961, negotiations on the entry of Denmark into the European Economic Community began. They were interrupted in 1963, resumed in 1969 and came to the end in 1972 with signing of the contract. On a referendum, the population of the country approved the introduction, and since January 1, 1973, Denmark became the member of EEC. The crisis of 1973 struck blow to the Danish economy. The internal political instability turned out to be consequence of what? Within the next decade of any party, it wasn't succeeded to create the long-term government coalition. The significant role in policy was played by the populist anti-tax Progress Party led by the lawyer Mogens Glistrup. In 1982, Poul Schlüter from the Conservative People's Party became the Prime Minister. He held the Prime Minister's post till 1993, having carried out a number of the transformations directed to mitigation of consequences of crisis. However, economic growth was resumed only in the early 90s when Denmark began oil production in the North Sea. Schlüter was a supporter of accession of Denmark to the Uniform European Act. After the parliament refused to ratify the act, in Denmark the referendum on which the majority supported ratification took place. In 1989, Denmark became the first country in the world which recognized the right of homosexual couples for the conclusion of the union. In 2012, the law on marriage equality came into force. Since 1993 in power in Denmark, there was a coalition government of Poul Nyrup Rasmussen. Adam. From the second attempt. On a referendum, Danes approved accession to the Maastricht Treaty. In the next years, leaders of Venstre Anders Fogh Rasmussen and Lars Løkke Rasmussen, Helle Thorning-Schmidt representing Social Democratic Party, were prime ministers. Since 2015, Lars Løkke Rasmussen again the Prime Minister of Denmark. In 2019, the leader of a social democratic patriot Mette Frederiksen won the regular parliamentary elections and became the Prime Minister of Denmark. The political system of Denmark: constitutional monarchy. According to the Constitution of June 5, 1953, the head of state, the king, since January 1972, the Queen Margrethe from a dynasty of Schleswig, Holstein, Sonderburg, Gladbach. The Queen carries out legislature together with unicameral parliament, a Folketing. The head of state, the king, queen, who is carrying out the supreme power through the appointed government. On representation of the Prime Minister, according to the proposal of the Chairman of the Parliament or heads of parliamentary fractions, appoints and dismisses the Prime Minister and ministers, has the right of dissolution of Parliament. The King, Queen, is the Supreme Commander Armed Forces of Denmark and the head of officially established church. The supreme body of legislature, unicameral parliament. Folketing. Elected by citizens of the country for 4 years. Suffrage is granted to citizens of Denmark, the men and women who reached 18 years. The source isn't specified. 1521 days. The parliament consists of 179 dicks, from which are chosen 135 on a proportional system on the basis of universal suffrage in 23 constituencies. 40 places, so-called additional, are distributed between candidates who didn't receive the sufficient number of votes in districts. 2 dicks of a Folketing are elected from the Faroe Islands and 2 from Greenland. The king carries out executive power through the government. Regering. Council of Ministers. Ministeriet. Consisting, since 1971, from 19 dicks and headed by the Prime Minister. The government is responsible before a Folketing. The meeting of all ministers forms the State Council. Statsrådet, at which the king and the successor of a throne sit and where the major bills and actions of the government are discussed. Is at the head of each amt. Territorial unit of Denmark. Appointed by the king, there is also electoral council. In rural communes, councils headed by the elective chairman are elected. In the cities, city councils headed by the burgomaster. The judicial system includes the Supreme Court, the Højesteret, till 1661 Retterting, the Rettertingjet, the Court of Appeal, for Jutland and for Islands, -2 land courts, the Landeret, till 1919 Territorial Supreme Courts, the Landsoveret, till 1805 Landstings, the Landsting, and local courts, the Byret, till 19th century Edbutinga, the Whiting, and Geredsting, the Herredsting. The top management of the judicial system, the Supreme Court. Copenhagen. Founded in 1661. In its structure, -15 judges headed by the chairman. He considers complaints to resolutions of inferior courts in one of two boards in structure not less than from 5 judges. In exceptional cases, the plenum of the Supreme Court gathers for consideration of crimes of officials of the judge of the Supreme Court, together with 15 dicks appointed by Folketing form the National Court. Riksret, the highest judicial authority of trade justice, see in trade court. Soag Handelsretten, bodies of prosecutor's office, the imperial lawyer, Riksadvokaten, and the state lawyers, Statsadvokat. The oldest members of the Supreme Court, and specially chosen a Folketing for 6 years of the judge, form the National Court, considering cases on charge of ministers of high treason. Till January 1, 2007, the territory of Denmark was divided into 14 administrative units, amt, to which there corresponded communes of amt. The Amtskommune. Communes of amt were divided into Torgovergårdsty communes. The Kopstadskommune. And parish communes. The Sognekommune. On municipal reform of 2007 of an Amta were reorganized into 5 large administrative regions. Hovedstaden, Zealand. Østlandia, Northern Jutland, Central Jutland and Southern Denmark. Each area in turn consists of the cities and communes. Lades. Commune. The cities can be divided into city districts. Lades. Weidel. Representative bodies of regions, regional councils. The Regeringsraad, chosen by the population, executive power in regions, chairman of regional councils. The Regeringsrådsformand, elected by regional councils. Representative body of the capital, civil representation. The Borgerrep, sanitation, chosen by the population, executive power in the capital is carried out by the Oberburgermeister. The Overborgmester, elected by civil representation. Representative bodies of the cities, city councils. The Byrad, chosen by the population, executive power in the cities is carried out by burgomasters. The Boardmester, in some cities magistrates. The Magistrat, consisting of the burgomaster and Ratman. The Radman, elected by city councils. Representative bodies of communes, municipal boards. The Communal Bestuurels. Till 1970, parish councils. The Sogneråd, chosen by the population, executive power in communes is carried out by burgomasters. The Boardmester, elected by communal boards. Representative bodies of city districts, city-county councils. The Wijdersraad. Till 2006 there was a division into Amta, representative bodies of Amt, the councils of Amt. Amtsrat. Elected by the population, executive bodies of Amt, the burgomasters of Amt. Amtsburgmester. Elected by councils of Amt, the central power in an Amta was presented Amtmannum. Amtment. Till 2007 in the country there were 270 municipalities. As a result of reform, municipalities were integrated, and their quantity was reduced to 98 at average population of municipality of 55,000 people. The special status as the archipelago of Ertkelman, he doesn't enter neither any of regions, nor in any of municipalities, and is operated by the Ministry of Defense of Denmark. The Faroe Islands and Greenland use autonomy and have own legislature, Lagting and a Landsting respectively. On the Faroe Islands, the central authorities regulate foreign policy, defense, currency policy, activity of police and the judicial system. The autonomy of Greenland long time was similar, but on a referendum in 2008 it was even more expanded. Defense expenditure in 2005 made 3% of the budget of Denmark. Armed Forces of Denmark. Forsvaret. Consist of ground forces. H. Ren. The Danish fleet. Dansk Marine. And the Air Force. Dansk Flyveforbund. And also the militarized voluntary organization Hemvern. TMF. On it. Which number in 2006 was about 59,000 people. The Supreme Commander is the monarch. Direct management of armed forces is performed by the Minister of Defense. In Denmark there is a conscription. Service life makes 10 months. But as the vast majority of slots are busy by volunteers, 96.9% in 2015. Upon those to someone to serve, choose by lot. The foreign policy of Denmark is based on 4 whales. The Union, NATO, the UN cooperation with the North European states. Denmark is a member of many international organizations, including OSCE, ODE, the Council of Europe, the UTO, Nordic Council. Denmark has reputation of the country which is reluctantly participating in unifying European processes. So accession to the Maastricht Treaty was approved on a referendum from the second attempt only after other members of the EU agreed to exempt Denmark from a number of obligations, including introduction of single currency and single citizenship and participation in the general security system. At the same time, during the presidency of the Council of the European Union in 2002, Denmark played an important role in negotiations on expansion of the EU, which crowned acceptance of 10 new dates in 2004. In 2014, Denmark joined sanctions of the EU against Russia. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Denmark, Martin Lidegaard, said, "We will fight for that occupations weren't legalized." Later, the ambassador of Denmark in Ukraine, Mary Giel, added, "Now sanctions is the only instrument of impact on Russia. Therefore they will be removed after the Russian Federation behaves as appropriate." In March 2015, between the Russian Federation and Denmark, the juicy political scandal burst. The Russian ambassador in Denmark, Mikhail Vanin, in an interview to the Jyllands-Posten newspaper, warned that accession of Copenhagen to a missile defense system of NATO will be apprehended by Moscow as threat, and if it happens, the Danish warships will become a target for the Russian nuclear missiles. At the beginning of 2016, the tone of the Danish comments concerning Russia strongly changed. So, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Denmark, Christian Jansen, explained how the lack of reforms in Ukraine is connected with removal of sanctions from Russia. According to him, sanctions of the West against Russia can be removed in case Ukraine slows down further carrying out reforms. If Ukraine doesn't undertake the reforms connected with the Minsk process, then it will be very difficult for Europe to be uniform in a question of sanctions, means Russia. In March 2016, the ambassador of Denmark in Russia, Thomas Winkler, in an interview to the Business Left Today edition, so characterized a present relationship between two countries. If to speak about everyday diplomatic relations, we carry out and we conduct the activity in a professional key, observing all political nuances. According to my Minister of Foreign Affairs, in a relationship with Russia we pursue bilateral policy. On the one hand, we react to actions of the Russian Federation which, from our point of view, she didn't need to undertake. On the other hand, we conduct dialogue to find a common ground in our relationship. Further, in a conversation, the ambassador determined the main directions by cooperation with the Russian Federation. I would note 3 directions in which we plan work. The first, continuation of dialogue at the political and diplomatic level that includes crises in Ukraine and Syria. The second, the direction where Denmark and Russia take a common position. It is fight against terrorism. The third, advance of the Danish business in Russia and also other types of activity, in particular in the field of culture where we have an extensive experience. As of 2017, the average amount of compensation in Denmark is 38596 kr. Euro 5169.86. Euros. And 24315 kr. Euro 3256.87. Net. In a month. Advantages. Low inflation. 2.4%. And unemployment. 5%. Big surplus in the balance of payments. In 2004, $4.14 billion. Reserves of gas and oil. Strong and profitable production, high tech. Highly skilled labor. Weaknesses. Heavy taxes. The decreasing competitiveness because of high salaries and strong krona. Denmark, the industrial and agrarian country with the high level of development. An industry share in national income more than 40%. The country is on the first place in the world on the volume of a foreign trade turnover per capita. Main export goods. Products of mechanical engineering, meat and meat products, dairy products, fish, medicines, furniture. Leading industries. Metalworking, mechanical engineering. Especially electrotechnical and radioelectronic. Food, chemical, cellulose, albuminous, textile. In agriculture, the leading role belongs to meat and milk livestock production. Denmark takes the 7th place in the world on a livestock of pigs minus 25 million, from them 87% go for export. In the report for 2009, analysts of the European Statistical Agency, Eurostat, the most expensive country called Denmark, in which life was for 41% more expensive than on average in Europe. Denmark isn't included into the Eurozone and has own currency, Danish krone. In 2000 in Denmark there took place the referendum on transition to Euro, but most of the population of 53% expressed against, 47% for. At the same time, Denmark follows the recommendations of the European Currency Union and provides compliance of national economy to the Maastricht criteria. The National Bank of Denmark supports the fixed exchange rate of Danish krone to Euro. Only Faroe Islands accept Danish krone own currency. Faroe Islands krone also is in circulation. In Greenland, introduction of the Greenland krone was planned, however this offer was rejected. The most part of the production capacities which were earlier located in the capital region is placed in the west of the country, in the western part of Jutland and on the island of Fyn. In 2005, 58% of the made products were exported. Since 1972, Denmark develops oil and gas-bearing fields in the North Sea. Only 19 fields. A part of production is exported. The main buyers of oil were Sweden and the Netherlands, gas, Germany and the Netherlands. Coal in Denmark isn't cotton imported from abroad. The main exporters: Republic of South Africa, Colombia, Russia, Poland. Denmark is one of world leaders in use of renewables, in particular wind power. In 2011 she won first place on a share of income from use of renewables in DDD of the country. She made 1% of 6.5 billion euros. A quarter of sales volume of industrial output makes mechanical engineering. About 12.5% of world production of wind generators fell to the share of the Vestas Wind Systems A/S company in 2009. Large producers of refrigerating appliances are the Danfoss A/S companies and Vestfrost of A/S. Green Store Nord Group of companies, the large producer of electronic products, entering into this holding, Green Mobile A/S, and Green Netcom A/S, are the leading developers of wireless telecommunications, and Green Resound, one of world leaders in the field of development of hearing aids. Long time of one of the leading industries of Denmark was shipbuilding, but lately the share of Denmark in world production was reduced from 3% in 1980 to 0.8% in 2004. The A.P. Møller-Mærsk Group company owns shipbuilding capacities and is the world's largest operator of container transportations and the third largest port operator. On shipyard of A.P. Møller-Mærsk Group in Odense in 2006, the biggest was constructed at that time in the world, the container carrier by M.M. Risk. Besides Odense, the shipbuilding centers are also Copenhagen and Aalborg. Denmark is the strategic transport hub. In 2000 Øresundsbro Bridge, which connected Copenhagen and the Swedish city of Malmö, thanks to which between Scandinavia and Central Europe automobile and railway communication functions was open. Denmark is connected with Germany, Sweden and Norway by regular ferry lines. As of the beginning of 2011, in Denmark 74,171 km of highways, including 1130 high-speed highways. Bridges through the Great Belt Straits and the Little Belt connect continental Denmark with the islands of Fyn and Zealand respectively. The most part of a railway system of the country is served by the state company Dansk Statsbaner. There are also private railway carriers. In Copenhagen and suburbs the system of the suburban and city trains S-Tog works. In the capital the only subway in the country also works. In Denmark 28 airports are located, 10 of which make regular passenger traffic. The largest airport Kastrup, Copenhagen. In 2010 his passenger turnover made 21.5 million people. The largest airline is the SAS airline. In 2005 expenses on healthcare made 13.6% of all public expenditures of Denmark. In 1973 the system of medical insurance was destroyed, and now the hospital help and the general medical practice are free. The main source of financing of health sector, the national and local taxes. Paid medical services in 1999 provided 16.2% of monetary receipts, voluntary health insurance minus 1.4%. About 30% of the population use his services. Hospitals and also nursing homes, generally belong to municipalities and are under authority of municipal bodies. Private hospitals make about 1% of beds. The role of the government comes down to development of the main directions of state policy and legislative regulation. In 2005 expenses for education made 14.8% of all budget of Denmark. The operating education system is installed by the Education Act of 2003. It includes preschool institutions, a day nursery and kindergartens, the general high schools, gymnasiums, national schools for adults and higher educational institutions. Compulsory school education consists of 3 links. A preparatory class, 1 year. The main school, 9 years. And an additional class for planning to continue training in a gymnasium or on training courses for going to the universities. In Denmark there are state, private and partially financed by the state schools. At public schools as of 2005 88% of children studied. Higher educational institutions are the universities, the specialized higher schools and colleges, and technical institutes. University of Copenhagen was founded in 1479, the Technical University of Denmark in Lyngby-Taarbæk in 1829. Since 1916 the Department of Theoretical Physics of University of Copenhagen was headed by one of the largest physicists of the 20th century, Niels Bohr. In 1920 he founded the Institute of Theoretical Physics, which later received a name of Bohr. Before World War II Denmark was one of the world centers of studying of physics of atom. From an era of Vikings there were monuments, fortresses of Trelleborg, Eigersberg, Fjerkit, Færkit, and Lindholm Høje. Since the 10th century were under construction wooden, and with 11 stone basilicas. The most known cathedrals, in Viborgen in Ribe, Church to Kalundborg and Locks of Seborg and Vordenborg in Roman style, cathedrals in Roskilde and Odense in Gothic. Frederiksborg Palace near the city of Hillerød and Kronborg in Helsingør is known. Elsinore, where Shakespeare placed action of the play Hamlet. The most beautiful buildings appear at Christian 4, 1588-1648. These are the houses in Baroque style and built a bit later in style of Rococo. The king admired and imitated architecture of Amsterdam. In Copenhagen, the Academy of Arts, 1745. The Christiansborg Palace, Fortress the Citadel, the Hunting Rosenborg, 17. Palace and so forth are enhanced by cultural monuments. The statue of the Little Mermaid in the port of Copenhagen, the character of the fairy tale Andersen which became like the Parisian Eiffel Tower, is also world famous of a country symbol. The first monuments of the Danish literature were created in Latin. Among them a specific place is held by Acts of Thanes, of Saxon Grammatic, the chronicle with the description of history of Denmark and ancient sagas. The Reformation had a great influence on development of literature in Danish. In 1550 Christian Pedersen transferred to Danish the Bible. Through his associate Lutheran Bishop Peter Palladius possesses the Book of Visits, describing cultural life of the Danish province. Also during this period the school drama was widely adopted. The 17th century is noted by distribution of the poetry of Baroque which is often based on religious plots. Thomas Kingo, Anders Bording and Anders Arabo were her representatives. In the 18th century in Denmark classicism literature dominated. Ludwig Holberg is considered the founder of the Danish theatre. His comedies brought him the nickname Danish Molière. The poet and playwright Johan Vessel was the author of a large number of satirical works. His comedy, Love Without Stockings, parodying stamps of the French classical tragedies is known. The beginning of the Danish Romanticism. It is considered to be works of the poet Johannes Ewald who came influence of the German literature, a storm and an impact. Many writers romantics addressed plots from the Scandinavian mythology and the history of Denmark. Among them there are Bernhard Ingemann and Adam Ellenschläger. Hans Christian Andersen was the largest figure of this period in all Danish literature. From his creativity the fairy tales filled with Christian morals and the deep philosophical contents are most known. In the second half of century the realism became the dominating direction of the Danish literature. The important role in his development was played by the literary critic and the public figure George Brandes. Among prominent writers of this period there are Jens Peter Jacobsen, the Nobel Prize laureate Carl Adolf Gellerup and Jacob Knudsen. In the middle of the 20th century the global recognition was gained by psychological prose of Hans Christian Brauner and fantastic short stories by Karen Blitzen. At a turn of centuries combines heritage of realistic tradition with stylistic experiments Peter Hoeg. In the spirit of disclosure of existential aspects of human existence Stig Dagliger uses genre richness of modern literature. In the Middle Ages songs of Skald were popular in Denmark. Later with Christianization of the country distribution was gained by the Gregorian chorals. In the 16th century classical music in Denmark developed under the influence of the Netherlands school. Then the first court chapels were created. Until the end of the 18th century in the Danish music the leading position was held by foreigners. Dietrich Buxtehude was a large composer of Baroque. The first operas in Danish were composed by Giuseppe Sarti. In the 19th century there was the Danish musical romanticism, a current which distinctive feature was a support on national culture. Niels Gade and Johan Hartmann were his bright representatives. In 1867 the Royal Danish Conservatory was founded. Carl Nielsen is considered the classic of the Danish music and the founder of the Danish composer school of the 20th century. At the end of the beginning of the 21st century, the most successful Danish musicians, the pop groups, Aqua and Alphabet, the rock groups, Mew, Kashmir and Michael Learns to Rock, the performer King Diamond Heavy Metal. Denmark since 1956 participated in the Eurovision contest and won 3 times. In 1963 first place was won by Greta and Jørgen Ingmanov's duet, in 2000 the Olsen brothers duet, and in 2013 Amelie de Forest. Now one of the most famous and successful singers of Denmark is Aura Dian. At the beginning of the 20th century Denmark was one of leaders of world cinema. In 1906 the Nordisk Film Company existing to this day was founded. In 1919 Carl Theodor Dreyer, one of the brightest European directors of the first half of the 20th century, debuted as the director. The actress Asta Nielsen was a star of silent cinema. In 1920 the first Danish animated film, Three Little Men, was created. In the 1930th film production was reduced as couldn't compete with products of Hollywood. After World War II there was a large number of movies which main subject was an occupation of Denmark by Nazis. Red Meadows, Bodil Ibsen and Laulort Senator won a prize of the Cannes Film Festival. The law on the state support of cinema was in the late 70s adopted that gave an incentive to film production in the country, and the films shot in the late 80s, Pelle Conqueror and Babette Feast, were awarded numerous awards worldwide. The Danish directors Lars von Trier and Thomas Vinterberg, creators of the Manifesto, Dogma 95, brought to new level low-budget cinema. The most popular sports in Denmark: soccer, badminton, handball, track and field athletics, sailing, bicycle sport. The victory in the European Football Championship of 1992 became the highest achievement of the national team of Denmark on soccer. The most popular clubs, Brøndby and Copenhagen. Independently also FIFA, the national team of the Faroe Islands, acts in the competitions OEA. Since 1990. The women's national team of Denmark on handball won the Olympic Games in 1996 and 2004. The men's national team won in the European Championship of 2008 and took the second place in the World Cups of 1967 and 2011. The National Olympic Committee of Denmark is formed in 1905. The team of Denmark competed at all Summer Olympic Games except Games of 1904 and at all Winter Olympic Games since 1948. The national team won in total 171 medals of the Summer Olympic Games, including 42 gold and 1 silver medal of the Winter Olympic Games. The yachtsman Paul Ellerstrom participated in 8 Olympic Games and on them won against 4 times. The native of Kenya athlete Wilson Kipketer, who took out the Danish citizenship in the 1990s, won the World Cup in run on 800 meters 3 times. Aaron Nimzowitsch and Bent Larsen were among the strongest chess players of the world of the time. The tennis player Caroline Wozniacki, following the results of 2010 and 2011, won first place in the rating of WTA. In Denmark, the bicycle sport, rowing World Cups on kayaks and to a canoe, equestrian sports, sailing, artistic gymnastics at different times were held, annual tennis tournaments and chess were organized. At the Copenhagen Stadium, Parken, there passed cup finals of cups and the UEFA Cup on soccer. In 2018 in Denmark, for the first time in the history, there took place the World Ice Hockey Championship. The Danish racing driver Tom Kristensen is the most titled pilot in the history of the race, 24 Hours of Le Mans. He won it 9 times. Also a winner of 24 Hours of Le Mans is the Danish racing driver John Nielsen. Several Danish racing drivers participated in Formula One World Cup. The most successful among them is the acting pilot of A-Series Kevin Magnussen, who took the second place in the debut race, the Grand Prix of Australia of 2014. TV and radio broadcasting is divided into public and commercial. The public speaker, Drive. Denmark's radio of Denmark, including Drive TV channels in the whole country, and Drive in capital area. Both Drive P radio stations, and TV2, including the TV channel of the same name. In the central Jutland, commercial TV channels, Kanal Copenhagen in capital area, and Sekseren in capital area and the central Jutland. Commercial radio stations, Nova FM in the whole country. Radio Siv in capital area, the central Jutland and Fyn. The Voice in the central Jutland and on Fyn. Radio 100 on Fyn. Radio Update and Pop FM in capital area. Also far. Write comments. Read comments. Interesting people will tell interesting stories. All of good mood and good luck.